the portal's blue light faded, and Rose stumbled into a vast circular chamber. Her legs gave out beneath her, sending her to her knees on smooth stone etched with intricate runes. The crystal pulsed warmly against her side as she caught her breath, its glow reflecting off polished marble walls. As her vision cleared, she found herself in what appeared to be some kind of portal nexus. Towering archways lined the chamber, each humming with latent magical energy. Some held active portals, their surfaces rippling like liquid metal, while others stood dark and dormant. The air itself felt charged, thick with the residual power of countless crossings between realms. Rose pushed herself to her feet, clutching her bag of gear closer. The fortress was gone, Kalian was gone, but the weight of their betrayal still pressed against her chest. She had escaped, but to where? And more importantly, how long before whoever maintained this place discovered her unauthorized arrival? The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the chamber, measured and purposeful. Rose's fingers tightened around her whip's handle as she pressed herself against one of the marble columns. She wasn't ready for another confrontation. Not yet, not here in this unfamiliar place. The sound of voices echoed through the corridor leading to the chamber, one stern and authoritative, the other younger and irritated. "Father, you can't seriously expect me to spend my entire day monitoring arrivals. That's what we have guards for. Draven, you are my heir. It's time you learned." Yes, responsibility and duty. I've heard it all before. Rose pressed herself against one of the marble columns as two figures entered. The older man wore elaborate robes marked with symbols of office, but it was the younger one who caught her attention. He moved with the easy grace of someone who'd never known hardship, his fine clothes and carefully styled dark hair speaking of wealth and privilege. His handsome features were twisted in a scowl that vanished the moment his father turned to face him. "Just 1 hour," the older man said firmly. "That's all I ask." "Of course, father." Draven's tone was suddenly smooth as silk, though Rose could see his jaw clench as his father left the chamber. The moment he was alone, or so he thought, Draven's pleasant mask dropped. He threw himself into an ornate chair near the central platform, looking for all the world like a petulant child denied a toy. The moment stretched as Draven lounged in his chair, absently flicking bits of magic into the air like someone tossing pebbles into a pond. His boredom was palpable, his attention everywhere except where it should have been, on the portals he was meant to be monitoring. Rose calculated her options. She could try to slip past him while he sulked, but one wrong move would draw his attention. Before she could decide, Draven spoke without looking in her direction. "You can come out now. I've known you were there since father left." His tone was lazy, almost amused. "Let's see what kind of troublemaker has stumbled into my father's precious portal chamber." Rose remained still, her fingers tightening around her whip. Draven sighed dramatically. "Look, either come out willingly, or I'll have to call the guards. And trust me, they're far less charming than I am." He smoothed an invisible wrinkle from his expensive coat. "Besides, I'm dreadfully bored, and you might prove entertaining." Rose weighed her options, recognizing both threat and opportunity in his casual arrogance. After Kalian's betrayal, the last thing she wanted was to trust another stranger. But she was in an unfamiliar realm, and this spoiled heir might be useful, if she played this right. She stepped out from behind the column, keeping her stance relaxed despite her wariness. "If I'm meant to be your entertainment, I hope you're easily amused." Draven's eyebrows rose as he took in her appearance. The travel-worn clothes, the whip at her side, the wariness in her stance. His lips curved into a smile that probably worked wonders on the local nobility. Well, not our usual class of visitor." He leaned forward, studying her with growing interest. "Tell me, what brings a lovely fugitive like yourself to our humble portal nexus?" "Who says I'm a fugitive?" "Please." He waved a hand dismissively. "Authorized travelers don't hide behind columns. Besides," His smile widened. The interesting ones never come through proper channels. And what makes you think I'm interesting? Rose asked, carefully gauging the distance between them. His relaxed posture screamed overconfidence, but she'd learned the hard way not to underestimate anyone. Draven stood with fluid grace, straightening his already immaculate coat. Because, my dear unexpected guest, you've managed to activate one of our portals without authorization, something that should be impossible. That alone makes you far more intriguing than the tedious nobles and merchants I usually deal with. He began to circle her slowly like a cat sizing up a particularly fascinating mouse. The question is, what am I going to do with you? You could let me walk out of here, Rose suggested, turning to keep him in view. Pretend you never saw me. Draven laughed, the sound rich with genuine amusement. Now, why would I do that when you're the most interesting thing that's happened all week? He stopped in front of her, too close for comfort. No, I think we can come to a much more mutually beneficial arrangement. Mutually beneficial? Rose kept her voice neutral, though warning bells rang in her mind. She'd heard similar words before, wrapped in different promises. And what exactly would that entail? Draven's smile widened as he gestured around the chamber. Father's determined to teach me responsibility by forcing me to monitor these portals. Tedious work, really. But if I were to, say, catch an unauthorized traveler. He paused meaningfully. Well, that would certainly prove I'm taking my duties seriously. Rose tensed. I'm not interested in being anyone's prop. Oh, don't be so dramatic. I'm offering you protection. He leaned against one of the marble columns, the picture of casual authority. You see, I tell Father I caught you, but instead of turning you over to the guards, I convince him to let me handle your case personally. You get to walk free, I get to look responsible, and everyone wins. And what do you really want in return? His eyes gleamed. Company, someone to make all this tedium more bearable. And, perhaps, he straightened, dropping some of his affected manner. Perhaps someone to help me with a few projects of my own. Projects? Rose kept her tone carefully curious, though her instincts screamed that his casual manner hid something darker. That's rather vague for someone offering protection. Details can wait until we've established trust. Draven's smile never wavered as he extended his hand. What do you say? A simple arrangement. Your assistance for my protection. Surely better than whatever fate awaits unauthorized travelers in Eldermire's cells. Rose studied his outstretched hand, remembering another hand offered in friendship not so long ago. But she was in a strange realm with no allies, no resources. And this spoiled noble's son might be her best chance at survival. For now. She took his hand, noting how smooth his skin was compared to her calloused palm. I suppose cells aren't really my style. Excellent choice. His grip tightened slightly before releasing her. Now, first things first, we need to get you looking a bit more presentable. Can't have my new protégé wandering around looking like she just fell through a portal, can we? Protégé. Rose arched an eyebrow. Draven's laugh echoed through the chamber. Well, we'll need some explanation for your presence here. And mysterious woman I found in the portal chamber might raise some uncomfortable questions. Draven's eyes flickered to the bag at her side. Of course, if you're to be my protégé, I should know exactly what I'm vouching for. He gestured to her pack with elegant fingers. That's quite a large bag for someone just passing through. Rose shifted the bag behind her slightly. Just the essentials. His casual tone didn't match the sudden sharpness in his gaze. You know, there have been reports of some rather valuable items going missing from various realms lately. Artifacts, weapons, that sort of thing. He stepped closer, dropping his voice. I'd hate to think I was offering protection to a common thief. Do I look common to you? Rose met his gaze steadily, though her heart pounded. She could see the calculation behind his friendly smile now. He was testing her, measuring her responses. Draven studied her for a long moment before his smile widened. No, he said finally. No, usurter. What's in the bag is my business, Rose said, keeping her voice firm but not confrontational. Part of our arrangement should be not asking too many questions. Oh, but asking questions is what I do best. Draven's smile remained playful, but something predatory had crept into his eyes. After all, if I'm to protect you, I need to know what I'm protecting you from. Or should I say, who? Rose felt the weight of the crystal against her side, remembered the chaos she'd left behind. The past, she said simply. Nothing that concerns Eldermire. The past, Draven repeated, tasting the word. How delightfully mysterious. He circled her again, but this time his casual manner felt more calculated. Very well, keep your secrets, for now. But remember, little fugitive, protection comes with a price. Sooner or later, you'll need to trust me. The irony of his words wasn't lost on Rose. Trust was what had led her here in the first place. Now, he continued, clapping his hands together, let's get you settled before Father returns. I know just the place where you can freshen up. Inly don't. Which makes me even more curious about what's in that bag. Follow me, Draven said, gesturing toward one of the corridors leading from the chamber, and try to look a bit more demure. We wouldn't want anyone questioning your role as my new protégé. Rose followed him through polished marble hallways, noting each turn, each potential escape route. The corridors of Eldermire were a maze of opulence, ornate tapestries, gleaming fixtures, everything speaking of wealth and power. Yet beneath the grandeur, she sensed something else, something that made her skin prickle with unease. Draven led her to a set of doors carved with intricate runes. My private wing, he explained, producing a key with a flourish. Father insisted I have my own space for study and contemplation. Really, I think he just got tired of my experiments disturbing his precious silence. The rooms beyond were exactly what Rose would expect from someone like Draven. Luxurious to the point of excess. Plush furnishings in deep blues and blacks, shelves lined with ancient tomes, and various magical artifacts displayed like trophies. The washroom is through there, he pointed to a side door. Clean yourself up, and I'll have something more appropriate brought for you to wear. His eyes lingered on her travel-worn clothes with barely disguised disdain. Rose scanned the room, taking in every detail through the lens of potential threats and escape routes. The windows were high and narrow, decorative but not practical for a quick exit. The numerous doors could mean either sanctuary or a trap. And where exactly am I supposed to put my belongings? She asked, one hand still gripping her bag. Draven gestured to an ornate wardrobe. You can store your essentials in there. Don't worry, my private chambers are warded. No one enters without my permission. His smile turned sly. Though I am curious what's so precious in that bag that you won't let it out of your sight. Curiosity can be dangerous, Rose said quietly, thinking of the crystal of Kalian, of everything that had led her here. Danger, Draven laughed, is precisely what makes life interesting. He moved to a cord near the wall and pulled it. My servant will bring appropriate attire. Once you're properly dressed, we can discuss those projects I mentioned. Rose stood her ground, bag still in hand. I prefer to keep my belongings close. Trust issues? Draven's eyes glittered with amusement. How intriguing. Very well, keep your mysteries, for now. But remember, little fugitive, secrets have a way of revealing themselves in time. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Draven opened it to reveal a servant carrying a bundle of clothes in deep blue silk. Ah, perfect timing, he said, taking the bundle and dismissing the servant with a wave. He held the clothes out to Rose. These should suit you better than whatever that is you're wearing. Rose accepted the clothes without comment, though the fabric probably cost more than most people in her old life saw in a year. Where exactly are you planning to tell people I came from? Leave the story to me, Draven said, moving to pour himself a drink from a crystal decanter. The nobility here are remarkably incurious about things that don't directly concern them. A new protégé from a distant realm, eager to study under my unique tutelage. He smiled over his glass. It's not even entirely a lie. And what exactly am I meant to be learning? His eyes darkened slightly, though his smile remained. Oh, I think we have much to teach each other. But first, he gestured to the washroom, make yourself presentable. We have appearances to maintain, after all. Rose entered the washroom, quietly closing the heavy door behind her. The room was as opulent as the rest of Draven's chambers. Polished marble, gilded fixtures, a bath large enough to swim in. She placed her bag carefully within arm's reach as she examined her reflection in an ornate mirror. Her face was smudged with soot from the fortress, her clothes bearing scorch marks from her own flames. She looked exactly like what she was, a fugitive who had fought her way to freedom. Draven was right about one thing. She'd need to change her appearance to avoid unwanted attention. As she cleaned away the evidence of her escape, Rose's mind worked furiously. Draven's offered protection came with strings she couldn't yet see, but she had little choice. She needed time to understand this realm, to plan her next move. Playing the role of his protégé might buy her that time. The silk clothes he'd provided fit perfectly, suspiciously so. Had he been watching her that closely in the portal chamber? The deep blue fabric complemented her colouring, making her look like she belonged in these opulent surroundings, a perfect prop for whatever game Draven was playing. When she emerged from the washroom, Draven was lounging in a high-backed chair, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass. His eyes widened slightly as he took in her transformed appearance. "Now that," he said, satisfaction evident in his tone, "is much better. You almost look the part already." He rose smoothly, crossing to a nearby table. "Care for a drink? We should celebrate our new arrangement." Rose watched him pour a second glass, noting how he kept his own between them like a shield. "I prefer to keep a clear head," she said. "Suspicious already?" Draven's smile widened as he set the second glass down. "Smart girl. Though I promise, if I wanted to harm you, I wouldn't need to resort to poison." He took a deliberate sip from his own glass. "Besides, that would rather defeat the purpose of our arrangement." "And what purpose is that, exactly?" Rose remained standing, watching him through narrowed eyes. "You still haven't explained these projects you mentioned." "All in good time." Draven settled back into his chair with practiced grace. "First, we need to establish your cover story. As far as anyone here is concerned, you're a promising young mage from—" He paused, studying her. "Let's say the outer provinces, seeking to expand your knowledge under my guidance." "And what exactly are you known for teaching?" His smile turned sharp. "The art of getting what you want, of course. Though officially I specialize in portal mechanics and realm theory." He gestured to the books lining his walls. "Father insists I maintain certain appearances." "Portal mechanics?" Rose kept her tone casual, though her mind raced with the implications. If Draven truly understood how the portals worked, he could be more dangerous, or more useful, than she'd first thought. "Among other things." He rose again, moving to one of the bookshelves. His fingers trailed along the spines of ancient tomes. "Though I find the practical applications far more interesting than the theory Father insists I study." He glanced back at her. "For instance, how did someone like you manage to access our portals without proper authorization?" Rose met his gaze steadily. "Perhaps I'm a quick study." Draven laughed, the sound rich with genuine amusement. "Oh, I think you're going to make things very interesting around here." He selected a book and held it out to her. "Consider this your first lesson. If anyone asks, you're studying basic portal theory under my guidance." Rose took the book, noting its weight and the way the runes on its cover seemed to shift in the light. "And what will I really be doing?" His smile turned predatory. "Learning how power really works in Eldermire, my dear student, and helping me acquire more of it." A sharp knock at the chamber door interrupted them. Draven's posture changed instantly, his casual arrogance replaced by practiced composure. "Perfect timing," he murmured. "Remember, you're eager to learn, respectful, and above all, grateful for this opportunity." He moved to open the door, revealing the imposing figure of his father. The portal master of Eldermire filled the doorway, his ceremonial robes gleaming with embedded runes of power. Where Draven affected casual grace, his father radiated authority with every movement. His sharp eyes found Rose immediately. Draven stepped forward smoothly. "Father, allow me to present my new student. She's shown remarkable aptitude for portal theory, though her previous education was somewhat lacking in proper technique." Rose dropped into a careful curtsy, keeping her eyes lowered. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to remain still as the portal master's gaze seemed to pierce through her carefully constructed facade. "Rise," the portal master commanded. His voice carried none of his son's silken charm. "Look at me when I address you." Rose straightened, meeting his gaze. His eyes were the same shade as Draven's, but where his sons held calculated amusement, the father's were cold and assessing. "Your name?" he demanded. "Rose, my lord." She kept her voice steady, humble but not cowering. "And what brings you to seek instruction in Eldermire?" The portal master circled her slowly, much as Draven had done earlier, but there was nothing playful in his evaluation, particularly through such irregular channels. Before she could respond, Draven stepped in smoothly. "I've already questioned her thoroughly, father. She shows remarkable potential, if somewhat unrefined. I believe with proper guidance—" "I addressed her, not you, Draven." The portal master's sharp tone cut through his son's explanation. His attention remained fixed on Rose. "Well?" Rose chose her words carefully, knowing her next moments might determine her survival. "My previous teachers," she said, letting a trace of bitterness colour her tone, "were more interested in controlling power than understanding it. When I heard of Eldermire's reputation for knowledge, She hesitated, as if embarrassed. "I'm afraid my eagerness outweighed my patience for proper channels." The portal master's eyes narrowed slightly. "And you believe my son can provide this understanding you seek?" Lord Draven has already shown more insight in our brief discussion than my previous mentors managed in years. The flattery felt bitter on her tongue, but she kept her expression earnest. "Has he indeed?" The portal master's gaze shifted to his son, who maintained his carefully composed expression. "And you wish to take responsibility for this irregular student, Draven?" "I do, father." Draven's voice carried just the right note of commitment. "Under my guidance, I believe she could become a credit to Eldermire." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Finally, the portal master spoke. "Very well. But remember, son, her actions reflect on you now. Any mishaps, and you will both face the consequences." "Of course, father," Draven bowed slightly. "I understand completely." The portal master turned back to Rose, his expression stern. "You will be registered as an official apprentice. Your movements within Eldermire will be monitored. Any attempt to access the portal chamber without express permission will result in immediate imprisonment." He paused, letting the threat sink in. "Is that clear?" "Yes, my lord." Rose kept her posture submissive, though her fingers itched to reach for her whip. "Thank you for this opportunity. See that you prove worthy of it." With a final piercing look at them both, the portal master swept from the room, his robes whispering against the marble floor. The moment the door closed, Draven's rigid posture melted away. He poured himself another drink, laughing softly. "Well played, my dear, though I'd advise against trying to manipulate father as easily as you do me. He's rather less forgiving of games." Rose watched him carefully. "You assume I'm playing games?" "Oh, I know you are." His smile turned sharp again. That's precisely why I chose you. 2 weeks into her apprenticeship, Rose had learned to dread the sound of rustling robes in Eldermire's corridors. She kept her eyes on the ancient tome before her in the library, hoping the portal master would pass by without notice, but the footsteps slowed, then stopped beside her table. Studying late, I see. His voice carried the same authority it always did, but there was something else in it now, something that made her skin crawl. Your dedication is admirable. Rose stood and bowed respectfully, keeping the massive oak table between them. Thank you, my lord. Your son is a demanding teacher. Indeed, the portal master moved around the table with measured steps, though I wonder if Draven is truly equipped to handle someone of your potential. His eyes lingered on her face a moment too long before dropping to the book she'd been reading. Portal theory can be so dry when studied alone. Perhaps you would benefit from some additional instruction. The offer hung in the air between them, its implications clear. Rose felt her pulse quicken, though she kept her expression carefully neutral. You honor me, my lord, but I wouldn't want to take up your valuable time. Time spent nurturing true talent is never wasted. The portal master's hand came to rest on the book beside hers, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. Draven shows promise, but he lacks experience in certain areas. Rose resisted the urge to pull away, knowing any obvious rejection could jeopardize her position. Your son speaks very highly of your teachings, my lord. He strives to live up to your example. Does he? Something flickered in the portal master's eyes, amusement or contempt she couldn't tell. My son strives for many things, few of them worthy of his station. His fingers brushed against hers as he drew the book away. You, on the other hand, seem to understand the value of power. The touch sent a chill down her spine, but Rose maintained her composed facade. This was dangerous territory, far more dangerous than Draven's games. One wrong move could destroy everything. I simply wish to learn, my lord, she said softly, lowering her eyes in what could be taken for submission or modesty. Learning requires the right teacher. The portal master leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Someone who truly understands the nature of power. Father? Draven's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stood in the library doorway, his usual casual grace replaced by something harder, colder. I've been looking for my student. The portal master straightened slowly, though his hand remained near Rose's on the table. Ah, Draven. We were just discussing your pupil's progress. Were you? Draven's tone was carefully neutral, but Rose caught the slight tightening of his jaw. How fortunate that I require her assistance with an urgent matter. Of course. The portal master finally stepped back, his eyes lingering on Rose. We'll continue our discussion another time. The words carried both promise and threat. Rose gathered her books quickly, moving to Draven's side. The tension between father and son crackled in the air like static before a storm. Draven's pace was quick as he led them through the corridors, his shoulders rigid with tension. He didn't speak until they reached his private chambers, closing the door with more force than necessary. You need to be more careful, he said finally, turning to face her. The playful mask he usually wore was gone, replaced by something darker. Father doesn't take well to resistance. I didn't encourage him, Rose said quietly, setting her books aside. No? Draven laughed, but there was no humour in it. You exist. That's encouragement enough for him. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disturbing its careful arrangement. Beautiful things have a way of disappearing in Eldermire when they catch his eye. Rose studied him carefully, noting the genuine concern beneath his anger. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Draven's expression shuttered. Let's just say you're not the first apprentice I've had. He moved to pour himself a drink, his hands less steady than usual. Though you might be the first to survive, if you're clever. What happened to the others? Rose asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Draven drained his glass before answering. Some were sent away, officially, to continue their studies elsewhere. Others simply vanished. Father always had perfectly reasonable explanations, of course. His laugh was bitter now. Accidents, unauthorized portal experiments. Tragic, really. And you just let it happen? The words came out sharper than she intended. He whirled to face her, eyes flashing. You think I had a choice? This is Eldermire, Rose. Father's word is law here. The only reason you're still relatively safe is because he's enjoying the game. He poured another drink, hands steadier now. The moment you bore him, or worse, the moment you truly catch his interest. I won't be another disappeared apprentice, Rose said firmly, her hand instinctively moving to where her whip was hidden beneath the fine clothes they'd given her. No, Draven agreed, studying her with that calculating look she'd come to know. No, I don't think you will be. But we'll need to be careful. Very careful. Careful how? Rose asked, watching as Draven began to pace the chamber. We need to accelerate our plans. He stopped at one of his bookshelves, pulling out several volumes with practiced precision. I had hoped to take more time to prepare properly, but Father's interest changes things. Rose moved closer, noting the ancient texts he was gathering. These aren't portal theory books. No, Draven smiled grimly. These are something far more interesting and far more forbidden. He laid the books on his desk, their covers marked with runes she didn't recognize. Tell me, Rose, how do you feel about breaking a few of Eldermire's most sacred laws? She thought of the crystal hidden among her belongings, of the portal master's lingering touches, of Kalian's betrayal that had led her here. I think, she said carefully, that laws are only sacred to those who make them. Draven's smile turned genuine, though no less dangerous. Good answer, because what I'm about to show you could either free us both or condemn us to a fate worse than my father's previous apprentices. Rose watched as Draven spread the ancient texts across his desk. The books seemed to drink in the lamplight, their runes shifting like living things across their covers. These, he said quietly, are the real secrets of Eldermire. Not the sanitized theory Father has me teaching, but the true nature of portal magic. His fingers traced one of the runes reverently. Power that could tear holes between realms, create doorways where none should exist. And your father keeps these locked away? Rose asked, though she already knew the answer. Control, Draven's voice dripped with disdain. Everything here is about control. Who can use the portals? When? How? He looked up at her, his eyes burning with intensity she hadn't seen before. But imagine if that control was broken. Rose studied him carefully. You're talking about more than just breaking a few rules. I'm talking about freedom. He stepped closer, lowering his voice though they were alone. Freedom from Father's games, from Eldermire's chains. But I need someone I can trust, someone who understands what it means to want escape. The irony of him asking for trust wasn't lost on her. But then again, she'd learned that sometimes the best lies were built on truth. And you think you can trust me? Rose kept her voice neutral, remembering all too well where trust had led her before. Trust is such an absolute word, Draven smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Let's say rather that we need each other. You need protection from Father's attention. I need someone clever enough to help me with what comes next. He tapped one of the forbidden books. Someone who isn't afraid to burn a few bridges. The choice of words made Rose's fingers tingle with remembered fire. What exactly are you planning? A redistribution of power? Draven's voice dropped even lower. Father isn't the only one who's been studying portal magic all these years. But while he hoards knowledge like a miser hoards gold, I've been learning how to use it. He opened one of the books, revealing diagrams that seemed to move on the page. There are other realms out there, Rose. Realms where we wouldn't have to bow and scrape to men like my father. All we need is the right key. Rose thought of the crystal hidden among her belongings. And what makes you think I can help? Draven's smile turned predatory. Because I see the same hunger in your eyes that I feel in my soul, the hunger for freedom, for power, for revenge. The encounter happened 3 days later. Rose was returning from the library through one of Eldermire's lesser-used corridors when she heard the familiar rustle of ceremonial robes behind her. Walking alone so late? The portal master's voice echoed off the stone walls. These passages can be dangerous after dark. Rose turned slowly, finding her retreat blocked by his imposing figure. The torchlight cast his shadow long and dark behind him, reaching for her like grasping fingers. "My lord," she bowed slightly, already calculating the distance to the main corridor. "I was just returning to my quarters." "Allow me to escort you." He closed the distance between them with measured steps. "I've been meaning to continue our discussion from the library." "You honour me, my lord." Rose kept her voice steady even as her pulse quickened. "But I wouldn't want to delay you from your duties." His hand shot out, catching her arm with surprising strength. "My dear girl," his voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before. "You don't seem to understand. When I offer something, it isn't a request." The fire that had been simmering inside her since Kalian's betrayal roared to life. Rose's free hand came up, and flames erupted between them, forcing him to release her. The heat was intense enough to singe his expensive robes. "No," she said quietly, fire dancing around her fingers. "I understand perfectly, but I don't think you do." The portal master staggered back, but his surprise quickly transformed into something more calculated. The fear in his eyes lasted only a moment before being replaced by keen interest. "Fire magic," he said softly, brushing at his singed sleeve. "How fascinating. Draven failed to mention this particular talent of yours." His smile returned, more predatory than before. "You continue to prove more intriguing by the day." Rose kept the flames dancing around her fingers, a clear warning. "I prefer to keep my talents private, my lord." "Indeed." He straightened his robes, composure fully restored. Though privacy can be such a negotiable thing in Eldermire. His eyes gleamed in the firelight. "Power like yours shouldn't be hidden away. With proper guidance, proper protection, you could go far here." In the shadows of a connecting corridor, unseen by either of them, Draven watched the exchange with narrowed eyes. "I'm satisfied with your son's guidance," Rose said firmly, though she didn't extinguish her flames. The portal master's laugh was soft and dangerous. "For now, perhaps. We'll speak again soon, my dear. When you're ready to discuss more profitable arrangements." He turned and walked away, his bearing as regal as ever despite his singed appearance. Draven waited until Rose's footsteps had faded before emerging from the shadows. His mind raced with the implications of what he'd just witnessed. Fire magic, raw and powerful, wielded with a confidence that spoke of years of training. His little runaway apprentice was far more interesting than he'd first imagined. He moved silently through the corridors to his private study, his father's reaction playing over in his mind. The portal master hadn't been afraid. Not really. He'd been calculating, measuring, seeing Rose's power as something to be acquired rather than feared. Draven poured himself a drink with steady hands, though his thoughts were anything but calm. The forbidden books on his desk seemed to mock him now. He'd offered Rose secrets of portal magic, thinking that would bind her to him. But she had secrets of her own. He set his glass down, moving to a different shelf, one hidden behind a false panel. The books here were older, darker, texts his father didn't know he possessed. Somewhere in these pages there had to be information about fire mages powerful enough to challenge a portal master. "What are you really running from?" he murmured, selecting a volume. "And what else are you hiding in that bag of yours?" The moment the portal master disappeared around the corner, Rose let her flames die, but kept her magic simmering just beneath the surface. Her heart pounded, not from fear but from anger, at herself for revealing her power, at him for forcing her hand. She stood perfectly still, letting her other senses extend into the shadows around her. Years of training had taught her that safety wasn't just about what you could see. There. The faintest whisper of fabric against stone. A breath held too carefully. She didn't turn toward the connecting corridor where Draven lurked. Let him think his presence went unnoticed. This game required careful moves, and he had just revealed his hand without realizing it. His father wasn't the only one who knew how to calculate odds and measure power. Rose started walking, her steps unhurried despite every instinct screaming at her to run. She had shown one card in her hand tonight, but not all of them. Not yet. Rose entered her quarters, closing the door silently behind her. The room felt different now, every shadow a potential witness. She moved immediately to check her belongings, making sure the crystal remained safely hidden. Her fingers trembled slightly as she sat on the edge of her bed. 2 people now knew of her fire magic, the portal master who would try to use it, and his son who thought himself unseen in the shadows. The careful balance she'd been maintaining in Eldermire had shifted. The portal master's reaction troubled her. There had been no fear in his eyes, only calculation, as if her display of power had made her more valuable rather than dangerous. And Draven? His silent observation spoke volumes. He would have questions now, perhaps even suspicions about what else she might be hiding. Rose moved to the window, staring out at Eldermire's twilight sky. She had escaped one prison only to find herself in another, more gilded cage. But this time, she had chosen it for now. The real question was how long she could maintain control of the game when both father and son were playing their own hands. Rose waited until the deepest part of night before moving to her hidden pack. The crystal's warmth greeted her touch as she carefully withdrew it, its glow muted through the cloth she'd wrapped it in. Her little display in the corridor had changed everything. If either the portal master or Draven decided to search her quarters, and she was certain at least one of them would, the current hiding place wouldn't be enough. She ran her fingers along the walls, testing for loose stones, hollow spaces, anything that might serve as a better hiding spot. The room was too obvious, too accessible. She needed somewhere they wouldn't think to look, somewhere neither father nor son would consider worth their attention. A memory surfaced, something she'd noticed during her first week here. The servants' passages, the forgotten corridors that ran behind the walls like veins through a body. The wealthy and powerful rarely thought about such spaces, considering them beneath notice. Rose wrapped the crystal more securely. She would need to move carefully, map out the hidden routes, find the perfect spot, one where she could retrieve it quickly if needed, but where no one else would think to search. Moving through Eldermire's servant passages felt like navigating the veins of some ancient beast. Rose traced her steps carefully, counting turns and noting landmarks in the darkness. The crystal's warmth seemed to pulse against her chest as she carried it, wrapped tightly and hidden beneath her clothes. She found the perfect spot behind a loose stone in a forgotten alcove, 3 levels below her quarters, but accessible through a direct vertical passage. It wasn't just hidden, it was defensible. Only one way in, one way out, and plenty of warning if anyone approached. After securing the crystal and carefully reconstructing its hiding place, Rose made her way back through the passages. Her fingers traced along the rough stone walls, memorizing every turn. If she needed to reach the crystal quickly, she couldn't risk getting lost. When she finally returned to her room, the first hints of dawn were creeping across the sky. She had just settled onto her bed when a knock echoed through her chamber, sharp, authoritative. Draven's voice carried through the door. "Time for your lessons, dear student. I have something rather special planned for today." Rose closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. The game was shifting, pieces moving into new positions, but at least now her most valuable piece was safely hidden. Rose opened the door to find Draven leaning against the frame, his usual casual grace masking something sharper in his eyes. "You look tired," he said, studying her face. "Trouble sleeping?" "The texts you gave me were rather engaging," she replied smoothly, noting how his gaze swept past her into the room. "Indeed." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Well, today's lesson will be more practical. Father has given us permission to use one of the lower chambers for some experimental portal work." Rose followed him through the corridors, every sense alert. There was tension in his shoulders, a subtle shift in his usual languid movements. He was leading her deeper into Eldermire than their usual training took them, down staircases she hadn't known existed. "Quite far for a simple lesson," she observed quietly. "Some kinds of magic require privacy," Draven said without turning. "Wouldn't you agree?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. The chamber Draven led her to was ancient, its walls carved with runes that seemed to shift in the dim light. A single stone table dominated the center, its surface etched with complex diagrams she didn't recognize. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Draven moved to the table, running his fingers along the etchings. "One of Eldermire's oldest training rooms. The walls are heavily warded. No magic can be detected from outside." Rose remained near the doorway, noting every detail of the room. "Convenient." "Very." He turned to face her, dropping his usual playful demeanor. "Which means we can speak freely, about many things. Fire magic, for instance." Rose kept her expression neutral, though her fingers itched to reach for her whip. "Is there something specific you wish to discuss?" "Oh, let's not play games." His smile turned sharp. "We both know what I saw in the corridor last night. The question is, what am I going to do with that information?" "That depends," Rose said carefully, "on what you think you saw." "I saw power," Draven replied, his eyes glittering in the dim light. "Raw, untamed fire magic, the kind that could be very useful to someone with the right ambitions." He moved closer, circling her like a predator sizing up potential prey. "The kind of power my father would love to control." "Is that a threat?" Rose's voice was soft, dangerous. "An observation." Draven stopped in front of her. "You're not the only one who keeps secrets, Rose. The only question is whether those secrets are better kept together." "And what would that cost me?" His smile widened. "Consider it an expansion of our current arrangement. You help me with my plans, and I ensure your particular talents remain our little secret. After all," he gestured to the warded walls, "we both know what happens to those who catch my father's full attention." "Your father has already seen what I can do," Rose said carefully, watching Draven's reaction. "Why should I fear him knowing more?" Draven's laugh held no humor. "Because right now, he thinks you're a curiosity, a pretty bird with sharp claws. The moment he suspects how much power you really have," he stepped closer. "Let's just say, his interest would become far more focused." Rose felt the weight of both men's attention like chains around her throat. The Portal Master's predatory gaze, Draven's calculated interest, she was caught between two fires, and her own flames couldn't protect her from both. "And what makes your interest any safer?" she asked, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. "Because unlike father, I don't want to cage you." Draven's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "I want to use you. And in return, you get to use me." The words reminded her too much of Kalian's promises, of trust offered and betrayed. But here in Eldermire, trust wasn't what mattered. Power was. And right now, she needed to choose the lesser evil. "Use each other," Rose repeated softly. "Like your father used those other apprentices?" Something darkened in Draven's expression. "I'm not my father." "No." Rose met his gaze steadily. "You're more careful about how you play your games. but they're still games, aren't they? Everything in Eldermire is a game. He moved to the stone table, tracing the runes etched into its surface. The only choice is whether you're a player or a piece. Father wants to make you his piece. He looked up at her. I'm offering you a chance to be a player. Rose thought of the crystal hidden in the servants' passage, of the portal master's lingering touches, of Draven's watchful eyes in dark corridors. She was already a player in this game, just not the one either of them thought she was. And what happens when I'm no longer useful to your game? Draven's smile turned sharp. That would depend entirely on how well you play it. So I choose between being your father's prize or your pawn, Rose said, moving closer to the stone table. Those don't seem like particularly appealing options. You misunderstand. Draven watched her approach. Father would make you a possession. I'm offering you a partnership. A partnership implies trust. Rose traced one of the runes on the table, remembering Kalian's betrayal. Trust seems rather rare in Eldermire. Trust is for fools and children, Draven said dismissively. I'm offering you something far more valuable. Mutual benefit. He placed his hand near hers on the table, not quite touching. Together, we could reshape this place. Change the rules of the game entirely. Rose looked up at him, measuring the ambition in his eyes against the calculation beneath. He was dangerous, perhaps more dangerous than his father in his own way. But he was also predictable in his hunger for power.
All right, you've made it this far. That means either you like what you're seeing, or you're lost. Either way, no harm in sticking around, right? Go on, hit that subscribe button, join the team, and while you're at it, hit like, because, let's be honest, you're already invested. And the bell? That's for you if you don't want to miss any of the action. You wouldn't want me to come find you. See you soon, and remember, once you're in, you're family.